by all the time things in the room. It's December 18th, 2024. We are gathered in the Tom Baker Meeting Room for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Bismarck Historic Preservation Commission. I have silenced my phone, so if everybody else wants to make sure they're silenced as well, please. Thank you. If we have people who are joining online for anything, we have the hand feature, so I think we're all pretty much acquainted with that now. So Annie, would you please call the roll?
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Engel. Here. Commissioner Swanson.
Here.
Commissioner Persley.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Nodland.
Here.
Commissioner Zinker. Chair Sackerson.
Here. All right, well, I guess we need to first off approve the minutes for the November 20th, 2024 meeting. I did have one correction myself. I think it was in that page 7. Where it came, there was a notation for the number of awards that were to be granted. Yeah. And it says somewhere, if I can find my page, somewhere where it would be that there would be 9 awards each year. And I don't believe that. I think we were thinking at the maximum of 3 per year.
3 per year.
Not 9 per year.
So there's 3 different categories, but that is
Potential, yeah, so, yeah.
3 potential categories and 3 maximum awards per year.
Yes.
I will correct that, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. That's the only comment I had on that. Did anybody else have any comments or corrections? Hearing none, I guess we would like to have a motion to approve.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Commissioner Jackson has moved to approve the minutes, and Commissioner Nodland has seconded that. No conversation appears to ensue, so Annie, would you call the roll again? Thank you.
Commissioner Nodland.
Yes.
Commissioner Engel.
Yes.
Commissioner Swanson.
Yes.
Commissioner Persley.
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yes.
Chair Sackerson.
Yes. Okay, and the meetings have been approved, and we are now on to our regular agenda. Lauren, I believe we start with A, the 2024 Historic Preservation Fund Grant Update.
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, there's 2 topics for discussion under this specific agenda item. The first is the reallocation of the $2,500 surplus funds, and the second is the draft request for a proposal for the South Capitol Survey. So the first one, there's a surplus of $2,500 of the 2024 Historic Preservation Fund grant money that needs to be reallocated in some different way. At the previous meeting last month, the Historic Preservation Commission provided an idea to create a brochure highlighting the history of Satchel Paige, baseball, and other sports within Bismarck. Staff was asked to determine if this would be an eligible expense and has invited Amy Munson with the state, who is online via Zoom, to speak on eligible expenses under Historic Preservation Fund grants for both staff and commissioners' understanding of eligible expenses. So a recommended action for this specific item would be to determine where to reallocate that additional funding for this specific grant. The second item under this agenda item is a request for proposals for the South Capitol Survey, which is provided in the packet. The layout of how that is follows a similar formatting for how the city tends to do requests for proposals, so it's laid out in that specific way. The project would include a Class 1 and Class 2 survey between Boulevard Avenue and Avenue A, as well as 4th Street and 6th Street. It would encompass 189 properties. The budget for that is $15,000. And for that specific item, staff is looking for review and then approval of the request for proposals with any changes that would need to be made. And if approved, that would follow the timeline that would be set within that request for proposals for solicitation and any additional approval needed by different boards such as yourself or city commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, well, let's reallocate that money. Amy, are you on the line?
I am.
All right. Well, I guess we do have some questions about whether, if we chose to create a brochure relating to the Satchel Paige Municipal Ballpark history, is that considered something that we can use that money for if it's not given to the ballpark, but it is generated by and from us as general distribution use? Is that an acceptable?
The ballpark is a particular, we've kind of run into a couple of issues. The State Historical Society is currently has an application to the National Park to receive an underrepresented community grant for ballparks and integrated baseball in North Dakota. So we're still waiting to hear about that. In the process of our the SHPO doing that, we received determination on the Bismarck ballpark as not being eligible for the National Register. That in turn would make the whole tie-in with Satchel Paige and highlighting that single property in a brochure using our federal funds in an ineligible project.
Even if it were, Satchel Paige in his own right is significant in the history of Bismarck overall.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference without the ballpark? I mean, he played ball in this town.
He did, and I think
for a local man.
Yeah, I think. It's a tough. It's a fine line, I guess, between being eligible and not eligible, and it really keys on that determination of that ballpark because that's where he played.
But if it weren't that ballpark, if he just played in this town, he's tied to this town. Commissioner Jackson has a comment.
So,
Sure.
Amy, if we just wanted to do like sort of a general brochure about the history of Satchel Paige and the 1935 team, let's say we don't even mention where they played. I mean, everybody knows where they played,
Yeah.
but why can't we just do something like that? I mean, we've done other projects that have no, I guess what I'm confused about, and I was confused at our last meeting, is where this requirement comes from that to use the grant funds, you have to be tied to an eligible property, because we do all sorts of projects with grant funds that have nothing to do with eligible properties.
It's particularly this one. It just all came up at the same time, and that we have that official designation from the National Park Service. Grant fund. The general rule for grant funds is that it needs to do the identification, evaluation, and protection of historic resources. If you can make the project fit that, I'm good with that.
We'll figure it out.
I think we can do that.
We'll figure it out.
Can we figure that out, folks?
We'll figure it out.
Probably.
The biggest thing would be that it can't be a brochure solely on that ballpark.
No, we don't.
That's-
No, but there are of course other players that
Yeah.
played in that, and there is also other Bismarck baseball history, different teams that played, different. Good heavens, the city funded costumes for the American Legion team. The prison team. So I think that we can, if we can toe that line carefully enough and not tie it to a site, but to the town.
That, yes.
Okay?
There is a good
Yeah, I mean, there
You've
is
got
a,
The Pards and the ones before that. and
well, there were
minor
actually,
league teams that were here.
it actually might, there were other ball diamonds throughout town early in the day. So it might be that calling out the general history of where ball was played, who played it,
You're the one.
and the dominant characters in that, which would be in our mission of being educational to what is distinctively a Bismarck resource. Nobody else had the resource that we have. We were this would be our resource, our history for baseball. So thank you. I think we can work on something that will make you happy. And I think that appears to be the wish of the commission. Right, any other questions of Amy at this point? All right. Well, thank you, Amy.
Yep, you're welcome.
Appreciate your clarifying that.
You bet.
Thanks. So I think we can do that.
You need a vote?
I think we need a motion, a broad motion, but narrow at the same time.
I move to, for the allocation of the extra $2,500 from the 2024 grant be used in the development of a brochure to cover the history of baseball in Bismarck, North Dakota.
I second.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Engel and a second from, well, it was a draw, but Scooter Pursley. So are there any other additional comments?
Is that something that you'll have to have a committee of people that have been working on it? Or how will you
I
go
would-
about getting the details? And
That's a good question. I would assume that this can be generated through material that's been written or provided through the resources we have perhaps at this table. And that wouldn't require anybody else.
So
Commissioner
we
Jackson?
should have some material from when we worked on the timeline, but then I've got material, I did a presentation for the Bismarck Historical Society a couple years ago about kind of the general history of baseball in Bismarck from like the early days up through the 35 team. And I've got some photos and things like that, so I'm happy to share all that.
All right, so we'll have a sort of a loose organization of people who have dug around and find that they can contribute, and we'll pull it all together. Does that sound
Good enough.
as if that works? All right, we've had enough discussion there, I think. So, if you call it, please.
Commissioner Pursley,
Yes.
Commissioner Nodland,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Swanson,
Yes.
Chair Sackerson.
Yes. All right, thanks. Well, get rid of that 2,500 easily enough. No, I think that's a really positive thing to do. It's certainly something that is, there are enough resources there that have been generated by people and can be added to by other people in this group that we can pull that together. All right. Well, then the next part of this is the South Capital Survey. What are we thinking about that? We've reviewed the RFP at length, and I believe that Commissioner Nodland has a few observations to make.
Chair Sackerson and Commissioners. And Annie, I also have notes I'll give you that if anybody, if these are things what people want to do, or whoever, so, and I should have been there, the meetings could have helped, but So there's a few things I want to ask that we get clarification on. One is if the principal investigator needs to be permitted in North Dakota, because right now it just says they need to be qualified under the Secretary of Interior's, but I believe they should be permitted. And the permit is going to give them an access code that they're going to need to be able to upload digital information on the state's site. So in the qualifications section, if we could, I assume the person needs to be permitted as an architectural historian. I think right now it mentions either a historian or architectural historian, but I think the person is going to need to be an architectural historian in order to get through the SHPO process. And then, so there were a couple of things on section 2 on page 12. And these are kind of small, and there's 3 or 4 of them, but I'll just go through them fast, and then you can have these notes. So, so through this process, whoever it is who's selected will do the background research and create kind of the documentation of that, and then they're going to create site forms, and then they're going to create a report, is my understanding. So in here right now, in item 2, it says they're going to create the initial site forms, and I'm not really sure what the word initial it means. I think that word initial should come out, and
Because some of them are already,
well, then I should say new or updated, because they're going to have to do both. And then we have on 2A, we mentioned that they're going to be doing data entry, and I don't know what that data entry would entail, so I don't know if that data entry could just come out. And then the question about the photographs, I think, might need a little bit more information. I think we could just say that the photos have to meet or exceed the minimum SHPO requirements, because that's in the regulations. And they're kicking back photos now that aren't meeting their requirements. So I think that we should be really careful to say that any photographs that the contractor gives us meet the minimum standards. And we've said the photographs could probably be taken from the street. And so I think we should clarify to our contractor if that means street and alley. And in the regs, find out what the SHPO wants. Because if they want photos of just the front of the building, or if there's hedges and fences and trees and they can't see the building, we need some clarification so that these photographs, just, I know this because we're going back out to take some photos and it's not a good thing. And so,
well, and occasionally you do need, if you can't get it because of vegetation and landscaping from the front, sometimes you actually do need to get it in. I think there are a lot of alleys, at least in that part of town, so that would be
So
a
2C,
public,
it's number 2C, if we could kind of clarify that the photos need to meet the regs. And then that also in that section is a question about, we're going to need to submit, the contractor is going to need to submit some digital data with these site forms. And so we need to clarify what we're looking for in these digital files, these shape files. Do we want a GPS point? Do we want a polygon? What is the SHPO going to want from us? Can they draw a boundary? Can our contractor draw the boundaries from aerial photographs? We need to make sure that the photos and the digital information meets the SHPO's level of requirement. And if we end up hiring somebody from out of state, they're not going to know that. Okay, then my next comments have to do with the schedule. And the first one is that this is 189 site forms that we are hiring someone to generate more or less. And so on the schedule, we've just said there's a submission on page 17. Just for everybody who's looking on, there's a submission in November. Site form review, it's the last box on the bottom of that page. So there's several steps here that we might want to include. So if they're gonna submit them to us to review first, or, then there's 189 of them that where somebody in the HPC will need to review, and then they will need to, once, if there are any corrections, they're gonna need a period of time, and then they get submitted to the SHPO. And then the SHPO has 15 days to review, and they are all coming back with comments right now and corrections. And then the contractor's gonna need to respond to those within 10 or 15 days, and then they go back to SHPO for another 15-day review. So there's a whole regulatory process here. So it gets lumped into November in this site form review, but it might be a little longer than that. Okay, then the next box on page 18 is the draft survey. And I'm assuming that is the written report.
Commissioner Nodland, Chair Commissioners, that was my understanding, just kind of reading through other RFPs for similar things.
Okay.
I can reword that.
Let's call it written report.
Okay.
Okay, and then that has the same kind of a regulatory process where they will submit it to us, and it will include those 189 or whatever number it ends up being. It will include all those site information now blended into a written report. And then someone will need to review it, and then they will need to make corrections, and then it goes to SHPO, and they will review it, and it comes back, and the contractor will need to make those corrections. It goes back to SHPO, they have another review period, and then, so I want to make sure that our contractor doesn't stop with a draft submission. Like on here, it sort of goes through February to get the draft in, because there might be a whole series of corrections back and forth from us and the SHPO at the end of this, and so they are kind of need to be on the hook for making those corrections. And then I have one more, and then I'll stop. And so the permit, making sure the person is permitted, and then we need to include on there that the contractor is responsible for uploading the digital data to the SHPO's MFT site. And then the SHPO will review that, and they may have corrections as well to the digital data. And so I just want to build in the actual submission, review, correction process into all three of those, the site forms, the report, and the digital data. And that's my comments.
Do you think that this time period is
I think with the
adequate?
holiday in there, with 189 forms at the end of a year, right now they have hundreds and hundreds of them to do, and so I don't know I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we have to realize that SHPO's got stuff too. Commissioner Engel had a comment.
Oh, I was just gonna say that the site form review, I assumed that was going to be a process with SHPO, getting the initial ones into SHPO, having them review and comment back.
Okay.
And
So
before
not-
they came to
not
us.
Okay.
So if we had anything to say, but that they would already be through that SHPO review process in
So-
November.
So
But,
let's build that in. Let's
Yeah.
put that process, it goes to SHPO first and then comes to us.
yeah, because, I mean, we as a commission are trying to get a reconnaissance, a baseline
Yeah.
for this area. We're not trying to review site forms for quality control, that's the SHPO's job. And then once they're accepted, then we can look at that as a whole, saying, okay, these are the ones that we should be seeing in the survey and the periods of significance, if there are any. But that was just.
Yeah.
Commissioner Noblin?
Yeah, and I'd like to add, if we have, because in the past, things have gone through the SHPO and then come to us, and we've had insider knowledge, or some of the commissioners have said, well, what about this that happened at these 3 properties? So that's why I'm hoping that we have some chance to look at them and see if there's something we can, or other people, that we know who would have some insider knowledge on these site forms before they're finalized.
Well, I think it's sort of built into the RFP that there can be some exchange of information, should this group have any,
Yeah.
to the process.
So,
Commissioner
I
Jackson.
mean, if there's a potential that the HPC is going to have input and want to change stuff on the site forms, does it make more sense for us to see them first before we go to SHPO? Because if we make changes, don't we have to go back to SHPO then?
Yes.
If that information needs to be changed at the site form level, if we're talking about additions or stories about those properties, that could easily just go into the report and not have
Okay.
to necessarily be
Okay.
in, or they could just update it and include it into the site. But that could be a conversation we have with Lorna as to how she wants to handle all that back and forth. Because I know there was a process with Highland Acres,
Yep.
so.
Lauren?
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, Amy Munson has her hand raised on Zoom.
Amy?
Since I'm still here,
Raise
I
your
thought I would share. Typically, what happens with some of these projects is the initial site forms, when we do a RFP, we request like 10% of the site forms to do that initial review to address all those nitpicky issues so they don't do all 189 incorrectly. But we can definitely work with Lauren and Lorna when pulling this RFP together to make sure that the timeframes are there and review on both ends happen.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Nodlin?
So can we add that initial review of the first 10% to the schedule in a specific line item in there?
Thank you, Amy. That was useful comments for us.
And I would like to add that we're not wedded to this. This was just basically like a timeline that we threw together to get your first blush, so we can extend it as much as we need to. So
Well, you also don't like to run things out.
no, not
Too
too
much,
far, but we
you know.
also don't need to make it so tight that we're already like
Yeah,
hamstringing
sweating.
the consultants. So.
Yep.
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, I can make the updates based on your comments to extend that timeline out further. As Commissioner Engel mentioned, we're not beholden to this. There is a little line right above that schedule that says it can be adjusted. And when we do go through the contract process with the consultant, we'd be hammering down that timeline further than what's included in the RFP here. This is just to get a general idea of when that would happen, but I will include those updates that Commissioner Nodlin asked for and extend that timeline, especially with the point being that the site form review would happen over the holiday season. That's a great point to have there.
And of course, the 10%
That's good.
thing, that's a real good catch there, because I remember with Highland Acres that you kind of need some of that, so.
Yeah, Commissioner Section. One way to build it in, I mean, it's just so that if we have a contractor and then we're near the end of the process and we get a bunch of comments back, that they don't just disappear. Well, they've submitted their draft, but, so you don't even need dates if you just put the steps, that they are responsible for addressing corrections or comments, then we don't even need the dates. But just the responsibility to bring things to final deliverables.
Great.
Would it be, Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, would it be helpful for some of these later dates in here? Would it be helpful to have a to be determined, so it's a bit more flexible in there on that time frame? That way we're not too beholden to a strict deadline.
Right, that we have to come back and
Yeah, okay.
readdress.
I can
Yes.
update it as
All right.
such and include those additional steps.
Yeah, I think that's super, but other than these comments, I think that, it looks like a good RFP.
Yeah, I've got
Commissioner
one,
Engel.
and I know I helped draft this largely, but now looking at it in the clean version that Lauren pulled together.
I thought this?
Yeah, right. In underneath section 2 of the architectural recon survey, some of these bullet points are reading closer to a class 3 in their undertaking. And so I want to tweak the language in there to make it very clear that these are initial first blush impressions of these properties, not in-depth, full-on class 3 research and evaluation for them. We're supposed to be making recommendations for periods of significance
Right.
for the area. That's what we're trying to get to. So I sent Lauren some maybe some verbiage on how to reword some of these so that it's not so class 3-ish. That it's a little bit more recon-esque. Yeah.
Just to make it public, are you okay if I provide those comments.
sure.
So changes would include document the existing historic character and conditions of each property within the survey area, completing NDCRS architectural site form for each property in the survey area. Data collected will include locational information, property boundaries, current ownership, date of construction, known architects or contractors, assessment of integrity, preliminary evaluation of significance under the National Register of Historic Places criteria, and site photographs, as noted with the additional photograph information that Commissioner Nodland provided. Update existing documentation of any previously recorded cultural resources within the survey area where eligibility has been determined in a previous survey. Such determination will remain unchanged unless the contractor provides evidence that the statement warrants change. And C, provide a historic context for the development of the survey area, make recommendations for future preservation activities, including additional survey recommendations and evaluation of National Register eligibility and district potential. Those are the main comments provided by Commissioner Engel.
Yeah.
Commissioner Nobland?
So Commissioner Engel, do you anticipate that if there's a next class 3 phase, that someone will have to go back to each of these 189 properties or
For the ones that will be eligible
contributing?
and contributing to whatever periods of significance that we've identified, we might want to do that.
Okay.
But they'll already be recorded, so it's, I don't know, that's next stage. This is supposed to be a recon.
Okay.
So,
And I thought that the requirement for a map suggesting a boundary was, it sounded like that was getting into a historic district nomination. But so I think I think you're right about kind of carefully working the language so that it makes clear this is that preliminary stage in working toward a district nomination, but if we can get as much work done without having to do it, but at class 1 and 2, would that normally suggest a possible boundary?
it would
Well-
identify the periods of significance for this region.
Yeah.
And the map would reflect which properties would fall into those
Period.
periods for the builds or whatever we find.
Okay, so that if we pick those periods of significance, and then we find out that there are structures on 3rd Street or 7th Street that fall into the same period, same builder, same whatever, then those eventual boundaries might incorporate a few nearby structures.
Because boundaries do,
I mean, it's not-
change
Yeah.
but if you haven't identified
Your
a
period of,
core to help you get to that
yeah,
information, then you can't just
yeah.
pull in things until you have a bulk of information
Yeah,
already. That's the inventory
yeah.
part. If we know,
But I guess I'm curious about that requirement for a proposed map for a historic district, and if it's, so it'll be dependent upon the periods of significance, and so I mean, if now we're arbitrarily saying it's only between 4th Street and 7th Street, that this potential historic district could be, so I think we'll get there eventually when we get to a historic district, but I thought that's,
so do you want to strike the map?
no, I would think we need a
definition?
map.
But I mean, I think
A
we
map
do.
of the properties that fall into the periods of significance.
Where within the map properties fall
Or their
within the.
suggestions
I mean, I
for
think
the
you go
periods.
Yeah.
about it the back
Backward,
way.
yeah.
You have where within the map
Yeah.
do these fall?
Because if
Not,
there's none up here and there's none over here and it stretches more like that,
Yeah.
that'll be, I mean,
Look
that'll
at-
be the way that we go
the
forward.
map, got the map,
Yeah.
where do these properties fall within that?
Yeah. Just that when you said it sounded like a class 3, I kind of thought, this sounds more like a district nomination, but I know that's where we're going.
Yes, we're
So-
trying to get, do we need a district?
Yeah.
We have to establish
Right.
what could be involved in
Yeah.
the district first, so,
Yeah.
baby steps.
Yeah.
Chair Sakerson,
Yes.
Commissioners, just for clarification, you are talking about the map notation under boundary recommendation, is that correct? So it sounds like take out most of that except for the creation of the boundary map that would be highlighting the periods of significance, worded better than what I'm saying right now. But is that the general idea of what I,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it was a deliverable or something, but yeah, I mean, it's fine. If we know where we're going, I just want this contractor who's never heard of any of this to understand what they're bidding on.
Do we have any other comments or concerns about that? So I believe we need to move ahead with this. And so we would be looking at proceeding with the RFP with the alterations and suggestions that we have discussed at length right now.
I'd like to make a motion.
I'd
Like to
be
make a
listening
motion to
one.
move forward with the RFP recommendation, with the alterations as discussed today, and any comments from the SHPO office related that
That
are added,
apply.
that apply.
I'll second that.
So we have a motion to accept it with alterations discussed today as an RFP and any potential ones that the SHPO would throw in. And we have a second by Commissioner Engel. Do we have any conversation, any further discussion about it? Commissioner Persley?
Just for clarification, what we're voting on is just to go ahead and put this, start this action in
Throw
motion.
it, yeah.
But if it comes back, will we have a finalized version with all the corrections made that we'll vote on? Or are we just counting on that to be done? Because what we talked about was kind of a deep discussion.
I think that we can be assured that between Lauren and the SHPO, that they will make sure that the observations and suggestions that we've put in here will be in the final one. And then, Commissioner Nodland?
Could Commissioner Engel, you were part of the development of it, could she review it too? Would you be willing to see it? And
I would be happy to review it again. To make
And
sure that
Commissioner
everything's in
Engel
there.
has offered to review that, so that it doesn't have to come back to the entire board. Good point there, Commissioner Persley, thank you.
And one other thing, the dates might have to be tweaked a little bit if we're looking at issuing this January 6th. If SHPO is not available, looking into the holiday season right now, if they don't have time to review.
Chair Sakerson, Commissioners, I did send a draft of this to SHPO previously and did get some related comments, not too much. I can reach out again to see if they have any additional comments or changes that they'd like to see.
So it's understood, I guess, that there will maybe some flexibility built into those dates from what we see here, but we're aware that that might happen, and SHPO's involved. So with those comments, we have to call a vote.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Swenson,
Yes.
Commissioner Persley,
Yes.
Commissioner Nodland,
yes,
Chair Sakerson.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. A lot of little tweaking, but, it's all necessary. The RFPs are devils in the detail there. And sometimes we need to have SHPO weigh in to make sure that we've got things so that it works with their schedule as well as what we want the schedule to be. So, thanks, everybody. All right, well, next we have are we on the update for the bylaws? Nope, oh, gosh, we're on the draft 2025 Historic Preservation Fund grant application. Gee, I just bumped right over things, didn't I? Lauren?
Chair Sakerson, Commissioners, the State Historical Society of North Dakota application window for the 2025 Historic Preservation Fund Grant for North Dakota Certified Local Governments has opened. The deadline to apply for this is Friday, February 14th, 2025. A timeline of the application submittal is provided in the agenda packet, just highlighting key deadlines that we'd need to meet for getting approval at certain boards. So what's also included is the grant application guidelines. That's kind of why the packet's so heavy this month. I just want to make sure you're seeing what I'm seeing when I'm creating this application draft.
But we don't want to see it. No.
And a draft application is provided as well within the agenda packet. I will note some of the items within the draft agenda do look a little different from previous discussions. The most notable one is through inquiries and in discussion with the state, it was determined that the Historic Preservation Award and certificates would be considered honoraria, which would be an ineligible expense under this grant. However, staff has been working specifically through community development to figure out that funding, so we will have plaques for that. So it's not being funded through this specifically, but it will find a different route for funding. So we are still on track for doing those awards for this next year. Staff has replaced that specific project with attendance of the 2026 National Alliance of Preservation Commissions Conference in Minneapolis. The North Dakota State Certified Local Government Coordinator has noted that she's looking to organize a meetup with other regional certified local governments as well at this conference. It would be a great opportunity to network or learn from some of those other certified local governments who have maybe a little bit more experience or have different ideas that work, and they'd be in the same historic environmental context that Bismarck is. Another thing to note, Daniel Nairn, the planning manager for community development, after last meeting, he has offered to provide design services for the historic preservation plan. It was noted that the design concept is fairly simple, and he's confident that he's able to provide those design services. So it has adjusted a bit based on that previous meeting. And conducting that design in-house will cut down costs in that aspect and provide an opportunity to provide some in-kind match. I will note that this draft application will not need a final action at this meeting here today. We are looking to get a majority of comments because this is a larger document, and it will be back to you next meeting in January. This is mainly to update certain donated labor costs in there, which will affect the whole budget of this grant. So we don't want to accept this prematurely without having that final budget identified. So as such, for this item, staff recommends reviewing and providing comments on the draft. And as stated, we will not need to approve this at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Yeah, I did wonder why it was so beefy. My computer practically didn't open. It's like, no, too many pages. Well, I would like to extend our thanks to Daniel Nairn for his offer of his time and talent. That's a very nice contribution to our stuff here. Thank him.
I have a question.
Commissioner Nodland has a question?
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, I have a question for Lauren. So from this packet where they give us examples of what they want really specifically for this grant for things, does it seem like our downtown update and intensive survey, have we accounted for the costs of all the things that are required? Do you feel pretty comfortable about that? think it's on page 43, and,
43.
and earlier. It's not much, but I just know that they're pretty good detailed in here about the requirements that they want. I just can't remember what we discussed as the need, the expense need for that project, how detailed we got.
Commissioner Nodland, Chair Commissioners, I know based on how they have their layout here within their guidelines that they do want it to make sure it's as itemized as we can get. Based on that, I did separate out parcel per the site form update area, so within the current downtown district. Based on your previous comments at last month's meeting, you did note that some of those will need to be completely redone, not just an update. I did not note that specifically in here, but it could be an addition that I could do in here. There's no, I guess, length requirement that I can't add more if needed. And then I did separate out the parcels for the new area, making sure to have an area south of the railroad tracks like you did
Saw that.
provide a suggestion for last time. I did talk with Chair Sackerson on just potential parcels south of there, just so we have a general idea of what might be remaining adjacent to the current district down there. However, if there's any additional thoughts or ideas, if I need to update anything for this specific item, because I know it is our larger project within this area, more than open to that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your extending that south of the tracks, because it actually, when you look at the history of Bismarck, it really is linked to that. And that is kind of something that we have kind of not dealt with in Bismarck's history, is the linear development of the community, and that's something I need to talk about later. But I think that the areas that you're looking at south of the tracks are adequate for the relationship of that to the existing defined downtown.
Yep.
So, pretty beefy project.
Well, we have a RFP draft template.
Enough to frighten everybody. No, but I will say at this point, that looking at this has made me, just looking at the whole corridor, I put it out now that when we look at what this segment that we want to have looked at, and looking ahead with this thing I've been thinking about the linear relationship with the community's growth with the railroad, I think that it might be, after this one, this might be like a center pin of perhaps another stage or two east and west along the railroad, to see to cover that. We'd ultimately get a picture of the downtown history, but then if we did other inventories after that, subsequently, we could catch the evolution of the railroad in Bismarck, from the penitentiary to Frame Barracks to the bridge, which would be useful I would think, to see, because the town didn't stretch miles either way. It stretched miles that way. And nowhere actually in our story of Bismarck do we really draw that map. We draw the downtown, the residential, but we don't draw the development. We don't have anything that represents that flow of development. And I think that that's kind of something that I wanted to just toss out as something that, looking after this one, it might be something, of course, I won't be on the commission anymore, but, it might be an interesting story that we have not drawn on, that we may need to, and it might be an important point to do it. So, Commissioner Nodland.
Chair Sackerson, I agree with you, and I'd like to expand that the development of the railroad lasted a certain period of time, but then the development of Old Highway 10 and the roads paralleled it and expanded it, and it's the same linear long path.
Same thing.
And it's one of the periods of significance of our historic district, and it involves statewide, regional, national transportation issues.
And the railroad context. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff that
So-
we deal with across the state
Yeah,
that we haven't really dealt with
yeah.
here.
So I don't think it's just the railroad. I think
No,
the roads,
it's more than that.
Old Highway 10 was right beside it.
Well, it's
And it's
the
where-
corridor concept.
Yeah.
Everything linked it.
Warehousing and
Yep.
sales, and it was the hub. Bismarck was the hub for all of that.
And we went from a focus early to where commerce came up the river. And so that's one winding commerce trail. But we have 2 generations of transportation history
Yeah.
that are, well, 3 really, that follow that, because even the interstate really, it's just north or south of our communities everywhere. It didn't just go, have no, it's still a linear transportation corridor that is a mirror of 2 earlier ones. But I mean, that's a story ultimately maybe we get to tell if we structure and look at things as a priority going forward. We do this thing,
Yeah.
and then perhaps before we branch out to other neighborhood things, we maybe look at filling in that story.
Well, and I think the downtown historic district is so much, that's its story. It first is the railroad, and then it's the reason Highway 10 came right through that downtown Bismarck, builds
To support.
hotels and car dealerships and agricultural machinery and warehousing of fruit and vegetables and grains. I mean, the reason downtown Bismarck is like that is because of those transportation corridors. So it's part of our historic district story, so we're going to get to it right away.
Yeah, but I think it needs to be,
I agree.
I think it needs to be expanded, and the context for it needs to be something that perhaps as an HPC,
Yeah.
we look at focusing as we make other years
Yeah.
inventories and stuff. I also think that because there is the possibility for the railroad to two-track through the communities, other communities are talking about that in other parts of the country where that has impacted, again, resources. So maybe what resources we have as a community that would be affected by potential. I think that's one of the things we're supposed to sort of do is look into a crystal ball and see what things might affect the resources we have. Well, we have to know what resources we have in order to be able to have a point of view. So, but at any rate, but I guess what we need to really do is talk about this grant application and what people think about it. Commissioner Nodland.
I think it looks great. It's an amazing amount of new work that we would do, and I'm just thinking of the stuff that we've done since we formed. I was struck by when I was reading this of like, we've come a long way, and so I think it looks great.
Thank you.
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, I will note if at this time you're not able to find like an item, but you note a misspelling or I need to rephrase something to make it more clear, you are able to message me or email me those corrections if needed, if you aren't able to note them right now. Right now, all I'm looking for is if there's a general idea of things I need to update or change, any big ticket items, if I miscalculated any donated labor that might need to be happening for specifically the downtown, for any site form review or any commissioner participation. I will note that in the downtown project item that I did only have 2 individual HPC members looking at site forms and accounting for about 30 minutes per site form for that, since there is quite a lot. That was just an estimate. If I need to increase or decrease that number, this would be a time to let me know that so I can make those adjustments before next meeting.
What page do you have that on? Those hours?
34?
Based on my packet, it says 58. It's the page right before the map of the downtown area surveys.
Yeah. 2 HPC individuals times $29 per hour times. So that's what she has.
Yeah, 76 hours.
Yep.
So how many site forms are there?
70, well, 100 donated labor for the HPC's review of the 151 total site forms, new and
151.
updated.
I think it's going to take more time than that.
That's completely fine, Commissioner.
And I think
Nothland.
somewhere earlier you have our rate a little higher than the $29.
So
Not
in
mine.
so how I calculated
average?
for
Okay.
these specific items was just doing an average of all your donated labor time. So
Okay. That's
it's
fine.
not pulling out specific HPC members. But I can update the amount of hours for that, especially based on our previous discussion with the RFP. Would you foresee that more commissioners would want to help review those forms before it would come to the actual commission? That's what this item is basically calling out. It's before it comes to the full commission for final review.
I know you have a guide or a scale that you're allowed to use to set the donated wages. Is that, so for some of us, that this is.
I'm the cheapest one.
It could be different, so how would we communicate that to you?
They'd average it.
You average it, but you average the overall, but for like individuals, you've got down to the cents here. Can you just explain to me how you get to the wages that each of us.
Commissioner Nodland, Chair Commissioners, so every 3 years I get a nice table from the State Historic Preservation Office identifying donated labor rates and how to calculate it and update it each year based on that. And it's based on their general idea for an archaeologist, a historic preservation professional. So they do have set ones, and if your profession isn't covered under that, or if what you're providing to the commission in your experience isn't covered under that, there is a separate table that I also look at for that. So that's how I'm getting my numbers and updating it each year based on those numbers that were presented in previous years, since a majority of you have been on the commission, or your background is provided in a previous year based on that. So I have used those to calculate those.
Okay. No, I'm just glad in this universe, an archaeologist is paid more than an attorney.
Yeah, I think Tori and I are the cheap ones.
The attorney better get his act together.
You don't want to put my legal rate in here.
In an hour.
I don't know what universe this is.
Chair Sackerson, Commissioner Jackson, your rate is based on your historian aspect there, not so much the lawyer aspect, which is why it's a little bit lower than what. But
It's better than Zenker's at 15 an hour.
Yeah, we should have them do more.
That's funny.
That is funny. Well, I think it looks like a whole lot of stuff I'm glad I don't have to make tables for. There's a lot of work in this. But we don't have to make a motion or anything here. We just have to review it and provide comments to you later if we need them. If there's anything that comes up where you think, oh my gosh, you know, that's way off base, then just contact Lauren and hash it out. Commissioner Jackson.
Lauren, is there a deadline for when you need people to get comments back to you so that you're ready for the next meeting?
the end of the first week of January. I know it's over the holidays. However, I'll need to start finalizing packets and everything to get it out, hopefully on time to you. So preferably by the Friday of the first week in January, first full week in January, excuse me. Let me double check.
All right, well then let us move on to the updated bylaws.
January 9th, please,
Oh, January
if
9th.
possible. Thank you. Chair Sackerson and Commissioners, staff has proposed some adjustments to the current bylaws for the Historic Preservation Commission. These include additions regarding appointment information, qualifications, compensation, and the amendment procedures for the bylaws. Based on the current bylaws, amendments to them should be introduced in writing at least 17 days prior to a regular meeting of the commission. This proposed amendment that you see in the packet today was introduced in last month's agenda for initial review. The recommended action for this specific item is to approve the amendments of the Historic Preservation Commission bylaws as identified in the draft.
Do you have any comments on this?
Have we changed this last time?
I'll make a motion to accept the bylaw amendments as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion to accept the revised bylaws or updated bylaws by Commissioner Engel and a second from Commissioner Jackson. Any comments? Commissioner?
I would just, on qualification, on C, the qualifications, it's underlined, so did that whole section change, or do you know what changed from the last one to the updated bylaw here?
Chair Sackerson, Commissioners, Commissioner Pursley. So any item except for like the underline after the letters, the initial letters there. So anything like the qualifications or compensation, or I guess the scratch out towards the end for amendment procedures, those are all new. So the full compensation and qualifications are brand new to the amendment. However, they are noted in ordinance like that, so it's just making doubly sure that everyone's aware of what those requirements are there. So that's why they're included in the amendments here.
Okay, did I just go out of order here and I went right to bylaws update and I skipped priority 3 and 4? I believe I just did. No?
No,
Okay,
no. They're in order, aren't we?
Yeah, we're in order.
all right. Well then, any further comments? None?
Commissioner Persley,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Swanson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Nodland,
Yes.
Chair Sakerson.
Yes. All right.
Chair Sakerson, Commissioners, this is an extra item under other business here. I would like to note this is Commissioner Jackson's last commission meeting. So staff and the Historic Preservation Commission would like to thank you, Commissioner Jackson, for your dedication to your work for the city as well as this commission and the community. We do have a resolution of appreciation for you today as well. Commissioner Jackson, for anyone who is listening online, has been involved in multiple projects, not just with the city, but with other entities in the community. Some specifically with the commission include the Bismarck Historic Timeline, as well as the Historic Preservation Plan is in its initial draft stages. So thank you so much for your dedication and your work with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Now he's going off, leaving us. It's no fair.
It's time for new blood.
Right, it's always time for new blood. All right, so any other business? We did, did we have to redo the October minutes? I don't think so.
No, you guys had made a motion and it passed, but Commissioner Nodland had asked me to just rephrase some of the words. I did review that with her, and she did approve those.
Well, if there is no other business then? None? Then I can adjourn until January 15th of 2025. Thank you, everybody.